Why are there certain places, certain spaces that make us feel uneasy? You're in a room at night, it's dark, and you're all alone, but for no reason that you can name, you decide to look over your shoulder. You know that nothing's there, but you decide to check anyway. What if that unease is pointing at something that's real? Today we're going to look at a movie trailer that taps into that exact feeling and asks where it might be coming from. Hey, I'm David, and this is Deeper Theology, where we explore culture. We look at movies, music, the moments we find ourselves in, and ask questions. What are they shaping us into? What do they say about us? What are we expressing without even realizing it? The theological and psychological forces at work here are probably deeper than we think. A trailer just dropped. I watched it. I couldn't stop thinking about it theologically. I even went and bought the shirt. It's called Backrooms. It's an A24 film that releases at the end of May, and it's directed by a guy named Kane Parsons, which you've probably never heard of. He's a 20-year-old YouTuber who built an entire mythology from scratch starting in 2022. And so this will be his first movie to direct. The mythology itself started sometime in 2019. Someone posted a photo of an empty room with this yellow-tinged wallpaper and asked what made it feel so disquieting. And that question became a whole mythology. There's two terms worth defining real quick. The first one is liminal, and it comes from the Latin word limen, L-I-M-E-N. And it means threshold, as in between, kind of not exactly where you were, not exactly where you're going. It's this sort of space between two states. The other word is no clip. Now, in gaming, clipping is the programming language piece, if you want to call it that, the technical piece that prevents characters from walking through walls. That's why you have to go to a door or jump in through a window on something like PUBG to get into the building. But if you remember the early days of PUBG, you could walk right through walls in some cases, and that's called no clipping, as in the clipping feature has been turned off. And the Backrooms mythology says that you could accidentally no clip out of reality itself, fall through the seams of the normal world, and into whatever is on the other side. Let's play the trailer.
I found something in the store.
Okay. What did you find?
The place. I found a place.
You found a place. Can you imagine how you would feel?
Hello?
आपको खुशामदीद कहते हैं।
Anyone there?
Look, I know how this sounds, but you gotta understand, it's massive in there.
I know how this
I'm not
sounds.
saying I don't believe you.
She doesn't believe him.
I'm gonna come back here with proof. All right, you feel me?
Yeah.
Follow my lead.
Clark, what is this?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I've been there every night since I found the place, and I still barely scratched the surface.
Been in
just
there
take it
every
slow.
night.
Oh my God.
Pull me up! Pull me up! Pull me up! What do you see?
All these rooms. This place builds them. It's like a maze. It just goes on and on. Sometimes I'm scared I'll get lost.
Clark, can you hear me?
That's the psychiatrist.
What is this?
It's beautiful. Am I right?
Hello?
All right. Before we get into the theological questions, just notice the specific thing that makes this place horrifying. It's not jump scares, it's something more precise. There's carpet, fluorescent lights, hallways, rooms, even some furniture here and there. All the architecture of somewhere that people should be.
Hello?
Except there's not any people.
Anyone there?
It's not like an empty field. It's more like an empty dining room with tables and chairs, food on the table, or maybe set up like a birthday party, except no one is there. Why does this specific thing unsettle people? Again, it's not jump scares, it's something slower. This sensation of just something is wrong here and I can't name it. What if this isn't just horror entertainment? What if it's pointing at something genuine inside us, a pull towards mystery, towards a sense that there's more going on than we can see? You know, a guy named Solomon wrote about this about 3,000 years ago, and what he wrote might actually speak to this. This is in Ecclesiastes 3, chapter 11. Solomon writes that God has placed eternity in the human heart. If that's true, if eternity is somehow embedded in us, maybe it's not surprising that we feel the pull of something beyond what we can hear, see, smell, taste, or touch. Maybe that low hum of unease isn't random. Maybe it's actually pointing somewhere. Let's go a little deeper. There's a space, there's a structure that was designed from the ground up around the idea of presence. Every measurement was specified, every material was chosen, and a blueprint for this space was made, but it wasn't drawn by an architect. In Exodus 25, 8 through 9, God tells Moses to make a sanctuary. He says to make it exactly like the pattern I show you, not human religious creativity, but God specified the blueprint. In Exodus 26, it talks about the veil, this blue, purple, scarlet curtain separating the holy place from the most holy place, designed to communicate something before anyone even stepped in. This idea that the holy and the common do not mix on human terms. There was only one person who could walk across that threshold, the high priest, and he could only go in once a year on a specific day. That'd be the Day of Atonement. And there was so much risk going into this room that they even tied a rope around the priest's ankle because no one else was allowed to go in after him. If he fell and hurt himself or died, then there was no way to get him out. And so they tied this rope onto his leg so that they could potentially pull him out. Now, you don't tie a rope around someone's ankle as a ceremonial gesture. You do it because something in that room has the potential to be genuinely overwhelming. We see this precisely in 1 Kings chapter 8 at the dedication of Solomon's temple. So the first one we talked about was actually the tabernacle. This was like a tent version of the temple. But then later, when the Jewish people finally got settled in the Promised Land, Solomon built a temple to the same design, the same basic outline, the holy, the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, all that, and this curtain, this veil that separated the two. But at the dedication of that temple, the glory of the Lord, it says, fills the temple so thick that the priests cannot perform their duties. Not so reverent of a moment that they paused, no, actually overwhelmed by what entered the room. This room, the most holy place, always kept one artifact, and that is the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant had on the top of it a place that was called the mercy seat. And it was this idea that God's presence came and dwelled right there at this seat above this gold box called the Ark of the Covenant. Now, if you've watched some Indiana Jones movies, then you have seen a version of this. But here is the part that makes the most sense and really graphically displays why there is so much risk going in to the most holy place once a year, why they tied a rope around the priest's ankle, and why there was serious potential of death. The best example is Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Nazis get their hands on the Ark, they open it, and their faces melt. Now, it's a little ridiculous, but the theological instinct behind this is ancient. You don't approach this on your own terms. Something was in that room. Something the veil was designed to separate people from. The architecture of the whole structure tells you what it was like to be near it. Remember that moment at the beginning of the trailer? Clark is in the store, and there's this wall he's looking at, and through it barely there's this thin line of light. He walks towards it. He leans his ear against the wall. The veil was like that wall, something on the other side, close enough to sense, but not accessible on your own terms. What a lot of people don't know is that that temple was eventually destroyed. Babylonian conquerors came and took over the whole kingdom, and the temple gets destroyed, and the ark that sat in that most holy place, it just disappears from history. The temple is rebuilt in the book of Ezra, chapter 6. You can read about that. Same blueprint, same ritual, but there's a problem. The room where men tied ropes to themselves before entering, where there was this ark and this mercy seat and where the presence of God came and sat, is now empty. And so on Yom Kippur every year, the high priest still goes in, still follows every step, still sprinkles the blood in the right places, except he's doing it over a stone floor where the mercy seat had once been. I find that haunting. He trained his whole life knowing what that room was capable of, and now when he walks in, it's quiet. What did he feel? Did the anticipation remain even when the reality of the ark not being there wasn't? Did some part of him brace for it? Did he get complacent? Year after year, in a room that stayed completely quiet. In the trailer, we hear that Clark goes in every night, not once a year, but every night, and he maps it. He tries to understand it. He keeps going back. The high priest had a name for that ritual and a date on the calendar to perform it. Clark just has a habit. But maybe the rhythm underneath both is the same, going back to something that keeps asking questions you don't have answers to. That's the Backrooms. Not in a thriller movie kind of way, but actually in a human way. All the architecture of somewhere presence should be, and you walk in, and the thing that used to fill it or you think is supposed to fill it isn't even there. In Matthew chapter 27, Jesus dies on the cross, and that veil we spoke of before is torn. It's torn in two from top to bottom, not bottom to top. It was God that tore the veil, not man. Maybe what people feel watching something like the Backrooms is that pull towards a threshold, that sense that there's something on the other side. The veil has been torn, but maybe we don't know what to do with that. Maybe we don't know whether we're allowed to go in or what we would find if we did. There's a question underneath all of this, and I think maybe you felt it. The most basic thing humans can do when they're not sure if they're alone is to actually call out. In the trailer, Clark has been in the back room. He can hear something. It sounds like voices, radio maybe, in a language he can't understand, something that might be communication from somewhere he can't locate. And he calls out towards it.
Hello?
आपको खुश आमदीद कहते हैं.
Anyone there?
There's a framework for what happens in that moment. John Bowlby did some work on attachment theory in human psychology, how human beings form bonds and what happens when those bonds are threatened. You've probably heard of separation anxiety, sometimes children deal with. John Bowlby identifies the cry of a newborn as essentially this same question. This idea that when we come into the world as a baby, we're already reaching for connection. And that's not a spiritual projection, it's biology. We're just not built for isolation. I've sat in that question in prayer. Not always in desperation, just sometimes just the ordinary rhythm of it, the same way Clark goes back every night, returning to it again and again, returning to prayer, not always sure what we'll find. Sometimes it goes quiet until something wakes it back up again, maybe a waiting room in a hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning. But here's something worth sitting with. In Genesis 3, right after the fall, God walks into the garden. The first question God asks in all of Scripture, and it's interesting that it's not judgment. He doesn't say, "What have you done?" Instead, God calls out, and he says, "Where are you?" And I'm wondering if that question has been going in both directions for a long time, longer than we realize. We've been asking it in quiet rooms, in prayers with no immediate answer, in the dark when something makes us look over our shoulder, and maybe the question was already being asked in the other direction. Maybe God was asking, "Where are you?" There's a moment in the trailer with the therapist. Someone she's responsible for is already lost in that liminal space, and she goes in after them. That's the kind of the same picture as a garden. Maybe the oldest search actually isn't even ours. I don't think there's a clean resolution here, not yet. Maybe sitting with that honestly is more valuable than researching for an answer that makes the unease go away. What if the unease is the point? What if it's eternity pressing up against the inside of our chest, asking whether we were made for something more than empty hallways and fluorescent lights? We started with a feeling, the kind you get when you look over your shoulder in a dark room, you're not quite sure why, and a movie trailer that taps into that exact same feeling. And following the question led somewhere older than any movie. We ended up in a garden with someone calling out, asking, "Where are you?" Now, I didn't plan to go there when I started thinking about this, but that's where the questions led. What you do with that, I'll leave that to you. But carry it a little longer than we usually allow ourselves to. And if something we talked about today is still in your head tomorrow, good. Let it stay there. Let it percolate. Follow it. Ask another question. And if you want to follow it with someone, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. And if these kinds of conversations are things that you're interested in and you want more of, then subscribe. Also hit like. It's the simplest way to help someone else find their way into these conversations. I'm David Russell, and this is Deeper Theology. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.